Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk to you real quick today about Donald Trump and his lying and one of his biggest lies, and to just point out how ridiculous that lie is. Not using any sources that MAGA or conservative media wouldn't accept, but just to really look at it from kind of a math point of view, logistics point of view, and then the reality of how media works. So first, Donald Trump, he, most of us would agree, anyone outside of MAGA would agree that he's pretty much a pathological liar. But I haven't really ever heard a real good explanation for why he just lies, even about things he doesn't need to lie about. And I think it's really because it's kind of the reason why most of us don't lie. Most people don't lie, is that it's just hard to keep track of the lies, right? It's just easier to live honestly, both not just morally, but also because it's tough to keep track of all those lies when you're constantly lying. You have to keep track of it. And I think Trump has just kind of reached the point where he just decided, like, even when he doesn't have to lie, he just throws lies in, because if he's always lying, he doesn't have to keep track of anything, right? He can just say whatever he feels like. He can just create his own reality. And then because there is some truth in, or, sprinkled in, the best lies, always have a nugget of truth. Because there's some truth sprinkled in, it gives his supporters kind of this license to pretend that, oh, well, because this is true, everything he says is true. Or that, it just doesn't matter, that his lies don't matter because it's just he's just a storyteller or whatever their deal is. But I really think he lies so much because it's just easier for him to do that than to have to keep track of any of them. It's just, like, I'm just going to always lie, just going to create my reality, and I don't have to keep track of any of it. That really seems like the logic he's using, which is very opposite of what most of us function from. So I think it's hard for a lot of people to understand, like, not only why does he do it, but how does he get away with it? You know what I mean? So, and I think that explains that a bit. And then the other thing I want to talk about is his lie about illegal, illegals, as he calls them, immigrants, basically people who aren't in this country, undocumented immigrants, voting in elections. And I'm somebody who's traveled quite a bit, and I've been in countries when elections were going on. And the idea that somebody would come to this country, especially as difficult as it can be, especially nowadays, to get here, to enter here, the money required to do so, the hardship required to do so, uprooting your life, that put all that at risk to vote in an election is just, it's just completely insane and asinine to me. I've been, like I said, in countries where elections were going on, and it's just so removed. Even if I was planning on moving there, and I wasn't, but I was just visiting, but even if I was, it's just so far off your day-to-day experience as a new immigrant or a visitor or whatever, that it's you don't understand the politics. It's very foreign to you, and it's very removed from your day-to-day life. So the idea that anything but like a slim little slice of immigrants would even be interested enough to vote, to participate in an election, is just, it's silly to me. It's ridiculous. They would be putting themselves at risk for deportation, for, to be arrested, fined, all the things, for something that doesn't connect to their lives at all. You have to be here for a while for you to understand politics well enough to care enough to want to vote. But they're claiming that anywhere between 1 and 2.7 million people are here illegally voting. That's insane. And here's the other thing is that the immigrants who I've met who, do care about politics, mostly have been conservative. So, even if that were true, it's not like some great Democratic Party monolith voting for, Democrats. It's just like anybody else. It's a cross slice. I mean, Cuban immigrants are hugely conservative. Um, I met people from Spain, from South America, Central America, conservative. Some because they're religious, others just because that's their politics. But it's so even if there are people voting who aren't citizens, they're not all voting Democratic to start with. And again, it's if they're politically motivated to vote when they're not supposed to be, that section is very small. So if there are people voting and they're doing it to give Democrats votes, right? That would imply that somebody's organizing them and paying them, because you wouldn't, if you're coming to this country, you're unfamiliar with their customs, you're unfamiliar with their processes, you're probably going to need some help to register to vote, to even know how to do so, to bypass the checks that are in place to prevent, undocumented immigrants from voting. To get around that would take some knowledge of the system that these people mostly just don't have. So that would require somebody to organize that. And as much energy has been devoted to this issue since Trump first raised it 10 years ago, right? We've been talking about this for a decade. And thinking about how media works these days, if there was somebody out there organizing this, they'd have to be paying these people. That wouldn't be a smoking gun, man. That'd be a smoking howitzer, a smoking cannon, a smoking warship. I mean, like, it'd be so obvious. Somebody would have found some proof by now. And the fact that they haven't, that it's all just this, statistical analysis, these studies that have been done, and just, lies that have been told, and people just buying into that, that's pretty revealing. But even looking at the math of it, like, it costs a fair amount of money to get here. Probably, at least on the low end, let's say $1,000, but probably more. So you're going to put that at risk. I mean, how much are you going to take to put that at risk, to risk being deported, or risk being thrown in prison, to, after all the effort and money you spent to get here, leaving your family behind? You're going to put that at risk. Well, it's not going to be a small amount, right? So it would, let's say 1 million people are doing this, and that's the low end of their estimate. And we're just they're being given $100 to do that, which, again, that's for the risk that they're putting themselves at to do so, for something that they don't really probably care about. It seems like a low number, but let's just say it's $100 for 1 million people. That's $100 million. Like, and this is, a lot of times, this is in races that the margin is not that close, especially in the border states, in California, and in Texas and Arizona, New Mexico, some of these border states. I mean, the margins aren't that close. These races aren't that big. The numbers aren't that big, in terms of the number of voters, and the margins aren't that close. So it's a lot of money that would be wasted just, for extra votes to candidates who would have won anyway. Or to pad a total for, in a presidential election, like Trump claimed, like with Clinton and Biden and Harris, that, in California, that there was a bunch of people voting illegally. California went comfortably to the Democrats, so just to pad that number, you're going to spend tens of millions of dollars. That makes no sense. And again, it would to do that would require such a coordinated effort that it would leave a huge smoking gun. And what we know about media, and especially conservative media, and how they like to uncover things, right? Are you telling me that in a decade, if somebody was spending $100 million every election, give or take, and again, that's on the low end. If they're if all these immigrants are willing to take just a fraction of what they spent to come here, to put themselves at great risk for something that they don't care about, that at $100, that, and it was that would be worth it, and that nobody would have exposed that with any tangible proof by now. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So even if you ignore, like, I know, like, usually people refute this with statistics and sources and government data and blah blah blah. So if you, even if you don't trust any of that, just, I mean, just a tiny little bit of common sense, using math, using what you know about the media environment, using what you know about human nature, and just, you know, taking one step back and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, somebody who came here, and thinking about what would they be willing to risk that for. It just doesn't make sense, man. The math doesn't math. It's just, so I mean, it's, again, you know, Trump lies about everything, and I, like I said, I think it's because he just decided that that's easier than keeping track of any of it. But just because there's nuggets of truth in there doesn't mean it's all true. And this is one. It's just, every time I hear it, I'm just, the math does not math. There's no flipping way that that many people are voting illegally. And if in the small fraction of maybe who care enough to, you know, to do it, maybe even if they're given money to do it, again, you know, those people, the politically motivated ones, are not all liberals. There are a lot of them are conservative. You know, so it's just, it's such a lie, and it's just such a lie that it just keeps coming back up every time it's convenient for Trump and his allies to raise this lie, to, you know, push whatever election narrative as the election approaches and things aren't looking good, or they need to push draconian authoritarian laws of their own to limit votes of people who should be allowed to vote. That's when this stuff comes up, and it's just a lie that's used to, you know, cover other lies, to cover their own bad behavior. And that's what this is all about. And of course their supporters, you know, jump on board and, you know, oh yeah, it's obviously true. It's so obviously not. If you just take the smallest bit of common sense, do a tiny little bit of math, think about the media environment, just the slightest bit, it just falls apart. Like, and you don't need to use government statistics to do it. You don't need to use any source that MAGA isn't going to trust to figure out that this is just a bunch of bullshit. And it's just another lie that Trump's pushing to push his own agenda. And so that's it. That's why Trump's doing it. That's how this can be disproved very easily. And I just thought I'd share that with you today, because it's just been bugging me that this keeps coming up and people keep pushing this lie, echoing this lie that is so obviously a lie. All right, have a good one. We'll be back soon with some more content. All right, take care.